There's something almost no one tells you about asking for help. Sometimes it's already on its way, and you won't even recognize the face of the person bringing it to you. You, Scorpio, have been trained to believe that you can only trust what you've already tested. A person who has proven their loyalty, a strength you felt firsthand, a sign you recognize from afar. Anything new is a threat until proven otherwise. This is the rule you yourself wrote at some point in your life when trusting too soon cost you dearly. But what if that rule, which has protected you for so long, is exactly what's preventing you from realizing the help that has already arrived? Because there's something moving near you right now. A person you haven't taken seriously yet, a message you almost ignored, an invitation you postponed because it's not really your thing. And your first instinct, the instinct that always saved you, is telling you to keep your distance. But this time, maybe it's not danger, maybe it's the answer. And that's hard to accept, because it would mean admitting that your radar, the one you've trained your whole life to detect threats before they even get close, might be wrong. Not always. Just this once. Just with this specific person who you've already decided, without even realizing it, doesn't deserve the benefit of the doubt. Scorpio has a strange relationship with what it doesn't control. You prefer the pain you already know to the cure you haven't yet understood. You prefer to carry the weight alone rather than admit, even for a second, that you might need someone who has never been on your radar of trust. And the universe, or God, or whatever you call that which organizes what seems chaotic, knows exactly that. It knows that if it sent help in an obvious way, the way you recognize, you would accept it too quickly and learn nothing. Then he changes the method. He sends it through someone you would never expect. Think of a scenario you've experienced. Someone saying the right thing at the wrong time from the wrong person, and you dismissing it simply because the packaging didn't match your expectations. How many times has this happened? How many responses have you rejected because they didn't come across the way you had decided deep down they needed to? This isn't about luck. It's about a pattern Scorpio has carried since long before any conscious decision. Distrust as a form of survival. You learned, perhaps too early, that making room for someone new is opening a door that may never close again. And every time a stranger approaches with good intentions, some old part of you whispers, "Be careful, this is a trap." And it's not just about people. It's about anything that comes your way, in a way you didn't choose. An opportunity that doesn't fit the format you imagined. A path that appears crooked, incomplete, without any guarantees. Scorpio wants to see the whole map before taking the first step. But certain help doesn't come with a map. It comes in pieces, and it's up to you to decide if you trust the process before seeing the end result. There's a phrase you may have said to yourself during a difficult time. If God wanted to help me, he would send it in a way I could understand. But what if the very fact that you didn't understand immediately was part of the plan? What if the disguise was necessary precisely because without it, you would have closed the door before it even truly opened? There's a difference between protection and blindness, and it's a subtler difference than it seems. It was while searching for answers to this question that I found this digital book, The 12 Laws of the Universe, that help your zodiac sign overcome spiritual envy. Doesn't talk about destiny in a superficial way. It talks about what happens when someone like you, who feels everything in layers, learns to distinguish between true protection and fear disguised as instinct. For a Scorpio, this changes everything because you don't accept any superficial explanation. You need to understand the mechanism. You need to get to the root. You need to feel that it's real before letting it in. And that's exactly what these laws do. They don't ask for blind faith. They show the workings behind what seems like coincidence. You are here now, still with that strange feeling in your chest, silently acknowledging that perhaps you have already ignored help because you didn't trust the form it took. This discomfort is no accident. It's the exact moment when something inside you is asking you to stop repeating the same pattern. And patterns don't break later, calmly, when things have cooled down. They break now, while it still hurts a little to look inside. The link is in the first pinned comment. But be aware, this content may be taken down. Click now and download your copy. And tell me in the comments, when was the last time you refused help just because it didn't come from who you expected? The truth is, Scorpios don't distrust just anyone. They distrust those who are too kind, too fast, without asking for anything in return. Because in their emotional history, unconditional kindness usually came with a hidden price. Someone helped, but then demanded something in return. Someone got close, but then used what they learned about you against you. So their defense system created a silent rule. The easier it seems, the more dangerous it must be. But God, if we're talking about Him or life, or the intelligence that orchestrates seemingly chance encounters, doesn't usually operate according to His rules. He doesn't ask permission from your radar of distrust before sending someone to help you. Sometimes He chooses precisely the most unlikely person because only they, with no history with you, no outstanding emotional debt, can offer you something clean, without ulterior motives, without future demands. And that's where the real discomfort lies. You don't know how to deal with help that's free. You know how to deal with exchange, with balanced costs, with I do this, you owe me that. But free help, coming from a stranger, for no apparent reason, breaks the logic you use to feel safe in the world. Perhaps that's why you've seen signs and called them coincidences. Perhaps you've heard the right phrase from the wrong person and dismissed it as, it's not quite how I imagined it. The question remains, how many of these coincidences need to repeat themselves before you accept that perhaps they aren't coincidences at all? There's a curious detail in all of this. Scorpios often say they trust their intuition above all else, that they feel things before understanding them rationally. But when intuition points in a direction that contradicts their usual distrust, something strange happens. You ignore your own intuition in the name of protection. It becomes a silent contradiction. You trust what you feel, except when what you feel asks you to make an exception precisely to the rule that protects you the most. And that's where things get interesting, because this contradiction isn't a flaw. It's just a sign that the protection at this specific point has already fulfilled its role and is ready to be reviewed. This is exactly the kind of question that keeps echoing after you recognize the pattern. How many times have I refused help because I didn't trust the packaging? The 12 laws of the universe that help the zodiac sign overcome spiritual envy works precisely on this layer, the one that separates healthy distrust from automatic blocking. For Scorpio, who feels everything intensely and processes everything behind the scenes, this material acts as a flashlight to your inner self, showing where protection ends and disguised fear begins. The last copies are running out, and this content may be taken down at any time. The link is in the first pinned comment. Click now and start seeing what was hidden right in front of you. There's a detail that few people talk about regarding Scorpio. You don't fear the unknown for its own sake. You fear losing control of the narrative. As long as you know who's who, what each person wants, what game is being played, you remain calm, even amidst chaos. The problem arises when someone appears without a label, without a declared intention, without a backstory that you can mentally consult before deciding whether to trust them. And that's precisely where the most important help often disguises itself, because if it came with a label, you would have already decided before even feeling it. You would have already put that person in a box, categorized them, filed them away. The help that truly changes something usually arrives without a category, a comment from a stranger, an action from someone you barely know, a phrase said without any weight by the speaker, but which struck you as if it had been written specifically for that moment. You felt this before and couldn't name it. You felt the shiver, the pause in your chest, that "why did this affect me so much?" coming from someone I barely know. And as always, your first reaction was to downplay it. It must be a coincidence. It must be my projection. It must be an exaggeration. But maybe that's not the case. Maybe it's exactly the opposite. Maybe this is the only form of help that can penetrate your defenses, because it doesn't ask for permission. It simply happens before you have time to raise your guard. Think about how many times you've categorized someone as not important simply because they weren't part of your established circle of trust. The delivery person who said something unexpected. The distant colleague who sent a message at an inconvenient time. The stranger who commented on your post for no apparent reason. You probably scrolled and moved on without imagining that it could be more than it seemed. Scorpio deeply underestimates the power of the small, the quick, the seemingly insignificant. You expect grand revelations, clear signs, concrete proof. But life rarely delivers like that. It delivers in fragments, scattered, demanding that you pay attention to what you would normally ignore. That "why did this affect me so much?" isn't nonsense. It's the exact moment when the shield gives way through a crack, even if only for an instant. The 12 laws of the universe that help the zodiac sign overcome spiritual envy helps to understand why certain people, certain phrases, certain seemingly random encounters carry a weight that logic alone cannot explain. For those who, like you, feel before understanding, this material gives a name to what was previously just a feeling and transforms recognition into direction. Access is becoming limited and may be withdrawn at any time. The link is pinned in the first comment. Click now before these last copies run out. There's another layer to all this that Scorpio rarely admits aloud. A part of you prefers to suffer alone rather than owe something to anyone. Accepting help for you isn't just about logistics. It's about connection. And connection, in your mind, means openness, and openness means risk. So even when you need to, even when you're at your limit, you prefer to manage on your own, you prefer to endure, you prefer to solve things on your own and only talk about it later, when it's all over, when there's no longer any danger of appearing vulnerable in front of anyone. But there's a trap in this silent pride. The more you solve everything on your own, the more you reinforce the belief that it has to be this way forever. And the more you reinforce this belief, the harder it becomes to recognize help when it arrives. Because your brain is no longer looking for it. It's trained to function without expecting anything from the outside. And that's exactly where God, if that's the word you use, or life or destiny, insists. He doesn't give up on sending you support just because you stopped expecting it. He changes his approach. He sends it through people you never asked, because people you would ask, you probably would have already rejected out of pride before even listening. Think about it. How many times has someone tried to help you and you replied, "No need, I can handle it"? And how many of those times did you really not need help? And how many times was it just your pride speaking louder than your real need? There's a difference between self-sufficiency and isolation disguised as strength. The first is healthy, it's earned, it's beautiful to see. The second is just fear in a more socially acceptable guise. And the problem is that from the outside, they both seem exactly the same. Only you inside know which one is driving you in each specific situation. Perhaps this is a question worth asking more than it seems. The last few times you refused support, were you truly okay, or were you just afraid of owing something to someone who might later use it against you? That "I can handle it" that you repeat almost reflexively is often the last barrier between you and the help that was already right there. The 12 laws of the universe that help this zodiac sign overcome spiritual envy shows how this silent pride, so common in Scorpio, can be blocking the very support that the universe has already arranged for you. It's not about weakness, it's about recognizing when resistance has ceased to be protection and has become isolation. This is the final batch of available copies, and the content may be removed without notice. The link is pinned in the first comment. Click now before it's gone. And tell me below, when was the last time you refused help just to prove you could handle it on your own? There's a recurring scene with slight variations in the life of almost every Scorpio. You're at rock bottom, alone by choice, and someone completely unexpected appears with a phrase, a gesture, an attitude that changes everything. Not because this person had a plan. Often they don't even realize the weight of what they did. They were simply there, available at the right moment, being themselves. And that's what bothers me most when you stop to think about it. The help that truly mattered in your life rarely came from the people you expected. It came from people who were just passing by, from a casual comment in any conversation, from someone you may never have seen again after that. This somewhat breaks the logic of control that Scorpio likes to maintain, because if help can come from anywhere, at any time, through anyone, then you can't simply close the doors to everything you don't recognize. You need to learn to be a little more open, even knowing that this means giving up some of the control that makes you feel safe. And perhaps that's exactly the point. Perhaps life, or God, is less interested in giving you security and more interested in teaching you to trust, even without it. There's a type of growth that only happens when you're forced to let go of control for a few seconds. Not because you want to, but because the situation demands it. And it's precisely in those seconds, the ones you didn't choose, that the most important learning usually enters. Not through the front door, neatly arranged and announced, but through the side door, disguised as an unforeseen event, as strangers, as circumstances beyond your control. Perhaps it's worth noticing that feeling next time before automatically dismissing it. Notice the shiver, the pause, the discomfort of something that doesn't fit into your mental script. Because it's quite likely that the answer you've been searching for is hidden precisely there, in that specific discomfort. There comes a point in every Scorpio's life when their armor stops protecting them and starts to trap them. It's not a day marked on the calendar. It's more subtle than that. It's the feeling of being tired of carrying everything alone, even after choosing to carry it all alone for so long, as if it were the only safe option. And it's precisely at this point of exhaustion that help usually appears, because only when you're exhausted enough to stop controlling every detail do you finally make room for someone to enter without going through your usual approval process. Perhaps this person has already appeared. Perhaps they will appear in the coming days. A comment, a phone call, a seemingly insignificant encounter. And your job, the only job that matters now, is not to find out who they are, nor to verify their credentials before accepting what they bring. It is simply to stop automatically dismissing everything that doesn't fit your mental script of how help should arrive. Because God, or life, or whatever you choose to call it, doesn't usually ask for your approval before acting. He acts through whoever is available, not necessarily through whoever you would choose. And perhaps that's the most uncomfortable and most beautiful lesson Scorpio needs to learn. That trusting isn't about giving up your intensity, your depth, your ability to see what others don't see. It's about using that same depth to recognize the good when it appears, even disguised as something strange. You didn't lose control by accepting help. You just stopped confusing control with loneliness. And that, for someone who carries so much inside, isn't weakness. It's perhaps the quietest form of courage there is. The next time someone unexpected crosses your path with a phrase that stirs more than it should, or a gesture that makes absolutely no logical sense, perhaps it's worth pausing for a second before dismissing it. Maybe that's the way the answer chose to reach you this time. And maybe, deep down, you already know this. You were just waiting for someone to say aloud what you've been feeling silently for a while, without the courage to admit it. Scorpio was born to transform. It's your nature, it's what runs beneath everything you do, even when you yourself don't realize it. And perhaps the greatest transformation of all isn't learning to blindly trust anyone without discernment. It's learning to distinguish, with the sensitivity you already possess, between what threatens and what rescues. And allowing yourself, when rescue appears, even in a face you've never seen before, to have the courage to recognize it. And above all, the courage to accept it. In the end, maybe the help never stopped arriving. Maybe it was just waiting for you to look at it differently.